Right. I'm live now on Facebook. Are you live?
Yes, I'm live as well.
Okay. Good. I think we can start. I'm starting the Skype call now. The recording.
Yeah.
Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to our weekly. Every Sunday we do a live Facebook, and at the same time we record a Skype conversation with Elliot Febve again today in the studio. Hello, Butler. Hello, Dr. Wiseman. Thank you for joining me so early. Callistas, thank you. Right. So, Elliot, how are you?
Good evening, Derek. I'm okay, and you?
I'm okay. I've got a few questions for you today. We are discussing social justice and food security, a book which you wrote. It's a UN Global Challenge by Elliot Febve. We've also been looking at this other book, Zimbabwe, My Home, My Frustration, Articles of Defiance. And today we're looking at chapter 2 of this book. Right. So to start, because today we want to do better than we've done in the past. In the past we've talked quite a lot. Hello, Mary, thank you. And today we just want to quickly go through the basics. So, social justice and food security, chapter 2, a deeper discussion on agriculture and public awareness. So that is the title of the chapter. So last week we looked at the shortcomings of the Rio Plus 20 summit in Brazil because of the voluntary nature of commitments. Okay, so instead of asking governments to commit and making sure there's a way that you can police it, the commitments are voluntary. So it's difficult to ensure that whatever commitments are made are then carried out to the letter. Okay, we saw how politics has struggled to address issues of sustainable development and food security. We also saw how a president like Donald Trump can ignore all scientific evidence and pass executive orders that benefit the elite constituents in America. This includes denying the link between the greenhouse gas emissions and climate change, bearing in mind the potential threat of climate change, okay, in terms of food security. So my take is that Donald Trump is behaving just like our African governments who have ignored scientific and technological advances as drivers of economic growth and development. So here's a president who has a nationalistic mindset at a time when globalization means that a problem anywhere is a problem everywhere. Okay. A great example being the 2008 global financial crisis, which started with subprime mortgages in America and in the UK, the swine flu pandemics, and also the Ebola virus, to name just a few issues where we need international cooperation to solve these problems. Okay, so he's building walls instead of bridges. Okay, but he's an American president. He affects us in a way. Okay, but today we want to focus on chapter 2, which is a deeper discussion on agriculture and public awareness. So agriculture has been on the UN Agenda 21 since its inception. That's what you say in your book, Elliot. I think personally that poverty is a human construct. Okay, some people are going to argue, but I think it's man-made. I think it's man-made because we invented it with a system of nation states. Okay, if you look at Africa, Africa has been subdivided into nation states. And also the creation of a debt instrument called money. I mean, we can talk about money on another occasion, but money itself is just a debt instrument to keep everyone paying up and make other people poor. So there's in your book you talk about the effect of fuel prices from OPEC countries. Okay, the fuel prices because of rising inputs, meaning that food production becomes more expensive. Okay, energy prices are determined by OPEC countries. So if we invest in biofuels, okay, including maize, soya beans, sugarcane, palm oil, these are also these plants are being used as biofuels. So it means that they are now competing with food security, because as much as we need food, okay, but big energy companies can pay more money for the same plants which we need for food, but they need it for biofuels, okay. But there are also non-food biofuel plants like switch and jatropha, but the problem is that they also compete for land, okay, with food crops which we use for food, okay. So what can we take from chapter 2, Elliot, bearing in mind some of the things that I've mentioned from the chapter?
Yeah, good evening. I would like to acknowledge some of the members viewing from my side. I can see there's Isaac here, there's Simon, there's Stanley, there's Professor Mapondere, there's Mary Ndoro, there's Rita, and many others. Again, before I link to today's chapter 2, I need to reflect on what we discussed last week quickly in terms of the Rio Summit of 2012, to which the theme was the future we want, came up with 3 main commitments, which they called voluntary commitments. And the first commitment was to come up with nature-based solutions to food security and also to global warming.
Yeah.
The second one was looked at the increase in food production, which actually links very well in terms of food security, using mechanization, innovation, technology to increase the production in terms of food availability.
Yeah.
But this is in the eyes that the population of the world is increasing at an alarming rate, and at the moment we are about 7 billion people, and we expect that trajectory of population increase to reach 8.5 billion in 2025.
And 83% of that will be in the developing world?
Indeed. So in a way, the thrust is on the increase of food production using technology, the new technology. And then the third voluntary commitment that they came out with was also to harness the potential of Africa, especially the African virgin soils, to increase production, because again, we've got the highest number of people in Africa who are under the poverty data line of less than $1 a day. So this is, in summary, what we discussed last week. Now, in chapter 2, I'm now operationalize the social justice and food security. In a way, the first, now looking at the energy, the correlation between energy and food security. There's a positive correlation between the availability of food and also the availability of energy as a catalyst to food production.
Yeah,
I say so in the sense that in terms of equipment, whether you're talking of tractors, combined harvesters, etc., all those use some form of energy. And this is why I also talked about oil.
Yeah.
So, and then I looked at okay, I'll talk about the various sources of energy, because I think it's very important, and then we can link that to Africa, and then we can also put in perspective to Zimbabwe's situation.
Yes.
Now, on that, I also looked at the UN report of 2004, in which it actually highlighted the need to come up with innovative means of increasing food production without damaging the environment, which is a follow-up to the Kyoto Protocol of 1997. So the Kyoto Protocol of 1997 was based on the premise that global warming exists and that it is a result of human action, which unfortunately the current president of the United States, which is the president of a free world, is trying to revoke as being a myth. And of course, the world have got a challenge. So much billions have been put in place in terms of harnessing intellectual capacity to mitigate against global warming, against climate change, and the world has moved on. And I think there is all evidence that the world has moved positively in terms of arrest greenhouse emissions, and also, I mean, clean environment. But again, we've got a challenge, so it's something that we have to discuss at a certain point. I think it requires a complete session. But yes, I looked at that. I looked at the peace and stability being key to food security. We have seen that the absence of food or the absence of equitable distribution of wealth can unsettle a social situation in a part of a region or a country. So I looked at Zimbabwe, I looked at DRC, Somalia, and the Darfur regions.
Were you thinking about also food riots in that context?
Indeed, the food riots that we saw in North Africa and then subsequent, yes, we still have Syria. Mind you, don't forget that Syria preceded the North Africa food riots. And all this is as a result of food security.
I think we had food riots in Harare at some point.
Indeed, yeah, including Zimbabwe. And this book is a live testimony of issues that have been documented that are not necessarily prehistoric or historical, but that continue to exist and continue to be challenges for policymakers globally and indeed in Africa. So I also looked at again the role of the United Nations. We've got various sort of subsidiaries or various organs of the United Nations that deals with energy, including ARED, AREED, which is the Agro-Rural Energy Enterprise and Development Initiative.
Yes, and is that is Ghana? You mentioned Ghana a lot in that. It's a big beneficiary of that scheme.
Yes, indeed. So what we are saying is within the United Nations, they've got a framework of supporting such initiatives within member states. But again, you have to come up with coherent policies that are fit very well into the agenda. And this is all fits also into the MDGs that we have just completed in 2015, and now we are in the 17 SDGs, with Sustainable Development Goals. So yes, any country that comes up with such initiatives that align with the global initiatives do, to some extent, get the funding, and Ghana benefited from that. Actually, the whole belt of East Africa. Right? But I've documented Ghana in this case. So yes, ARED has been involved in various activities in Africa, supporting the availability of energy. Here we are talking about sustainable energy and green energy. And not only that, I also documented some statistics in the sense that if you look at from African perspective, many African states still use coal as a source of energy, and it's the oldest source of energy. But coal, as we know it, it pollutes our atmosphere, and various countries globally, the United Nations is taking initiative to see to it that coal is replaced with with green and sustainable clean energy. So yes, and then apart from the core, which Zimbabwe is still using, we've got about 4 core stations in Zimbabwe at the moment. So we've got Hwange, we've got Bulawayo, we've got Harare, we've got Munyati. So we are still much dependent on dirty energy in a way, call it that way. But I was also sort of comparing with the development that have taken place in countries like Ghana. If you look at hydroelectric, Zimbabwe, we have got only 2 stations hydroelectric. With Kariba hydroelectric, which was done pre-independence. So we haven't done much after independence as a country.
Yeah.
And then the second one, the second hydroelectric source that we have is the Batoka Gorge, which is a joint venture with Zambia. So as a country, Zimbabwe were unable to come up with such a project other than a joint venture with a neighboring country.
Yes.
So we've got 2. Now, compare that to Ghana. Ghana have got 40 hydro stations.
But they went up from 2 to 40.
Yes.
Okay.
And in terms of they've moved forward as well in terms of solar energy.
Solar energy, yeah. They've got 70. Is it 70
They've
plus?
got 70 now. They've got over 70 photovoltaic systems. And what do we have as a country other than individuals using micro solar panels? We don't have at a government level an initiative to install solar.
Right. So one of the major things that I picked up from this chapter, okay, is that we can talk about solar energy, and but when we look at how it is competing with land, for example, a solar farm will take up so much land, which will be competing with food security, because that piece of land could have been used for growing food.
Indeed, yeah. So yes, and then I looked at in terms of oil. I think we saw this in the 2008 and 2009. Actually, even now, Zimbabwe and other countries in Africa, for that matter, who don't produce oil, right? They are at the mercy of OPEC, and this is a cartel for oil-producing countries. Most of these countries, they are actually in the Middle East.
So how does oil and OPEC countries impact on food security in Zimbabwe, for example?
It does, because at the moment you find that because we don't produce oil, we import entirely petrol and diesel in the country. Therefore, it means the mega foreign currencies that we have, we are actually directed to energy, to oil, rather than to infrastructure development within the country. Apart from infrastructure development, we are also diverting resources that maybe we might have been importing food, therefore averting starvation. So there's that dilemma that at the end of the day.
So if the prices of oil go up, for example, that means food goes up, because everything is transported. So that means that our food security is affected by an increase in oil prices.
Indeed. I mean, the oil prices are very volatile. And if you look at it, look from an agro business point of view, the moment you talk about the use of tractors, combined harvesters, transporting goods from one source or one source to the market, you're talking about fuel, you're talking about energy, and any spike in terms of the price of energy or oil would actually impact directly to the consumer price and the price of the consumer. So yes, so hence there is need for Africa and indeed the developing world to look at other sources of energy.
Okay, so in order to do that, to look for other sources of energy, what do we take into consideration? Because we are worried about food security. But if you look at other sources of energy, or maybe you want to talk about the other sources before I ask that question, because in my question, I want to see if there is competition between those other sources of energy, okay, which are more sustainable than the fossil fuels which we are using in terms of coal and petroleum. How are those then competing in terms of, because some of them are biofuels, which means they are food products. And if you've heard stories of Americans, for example, they plant a lot of maize, okay, yes. But most of that maize, instead of finding its way to people who need food, it's finding its way into energy companies, which are then converting that into a biofuel.
Indeed, yeah. I mean, currently you find the most successful companies in terms of the use of biofuel is United States and Brazil. So we are talking here about, yes, there's a competition between the food production with biofuel crops.
Yeah.
For example, we have seen in a couple of years, cast back to about 10 years, the use of sugarcane in ethanol, enriching diesel or the production of diesel.
Yes.
Zimbabwe, I think at one point, currently there was this project.
I remember that one.
Of using ethanol.
Ethanol, yeah.
But then, yes, it means then we are producing sugar, and that sugar, apart from the sugar being specifically for human consumption, there is then a competition with energy.
Okay,
yes.
in terms of what?
In terms that much of it depends again with the government policy.
But I want to touch specifically on let's consider a farmer, right? A farmer has grown some sugar cane. Yes. The government wants to buy his sugar cane, but maybe they are offering $1 per kg. Okay.
Yes.
Then you get an energy company which is offering $5 per kilogram of the sugar cane. So what does the farmer do? Is that the sort of competition we're talking about?
Indeed, this is where I'm saying that then it comes to the government policies. Because if the government policies do not balance the food production in terms of consumption with energy, then you get farmers. If the farmers are getting a better price with sugar cane being sold for fuel, then obviously much of the production of sugar will go to energy. And at the end of the day, there will be shortages within the country. But those operational can be actually factored in terms of government policies.
Okay, so what can the government say, for example, as a policy? Can they say, okay, we're going to pay more for the sugar to the farmer, or can they say they are going to give some kind of incentive to encourage the farmer to sell to the government for food security instead of selling to energy companies?
There are various ways that they can actually approach it. One other way is in terms of taxes, that any producer that is producing for food consumption will have lower corporation tax, and then much tax in terms of energy, and that becomes an incentive in its own right. There could be other schemes whereby then the government will then promote small-scale farmers to get into sugarcane growing, so that they can then meet the demand of domestic consumption. So yes, all that, the supply and demand can be actually factored in the policy of the government policy.
Yes.
So the government can actually control in terms of that.
But it's
yes,
still
we're talking about sugarcane here. And it's not only sugarcane. So we've seen soybeans.
Soybeans, yes.
Biofuel.
Yeah.
We've seen maize, as you have said.
Yeah. So there's maize, soybeans, sugarcane, palm oil.
Yes.
Even rice.
Yes.
Before it gets to the rally, it can be used.
Indeed.
Yes.
So given that maize is a staple food for Zimbabwe, again, there is that challenge whether it makes sense for us to promote maize as a source of fuel. But again, what we are saying is, if you go back to the 2012 Rio de Janeiro, whereby,
is it 2012 or 2002? I'm not sure.
No, 2012.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. There was 1992.
Oh, okay.
Rio
There
were two summits.
It's every 10 years, isn't it?
The first summit was 1992.
Yeah.
And then the 2002 was in South Africa, Joburg. And then 2012 was back in Rio.
Oh, okay. So basically we're saying here that governments are in a catch-22 because for one, they are trying to provide a sustainable, or they are trying to use fuels that are more sustainable, okay, in terms of biofuels. But at the same time, the biofuels are competing with food security in their country. Yet the United Nations and the rest of the world is expecting us to use biofuels instead of fossil fuels. So it's a catch-22.
I think there's a capacity. If you look at from in Zimbabwe or in Africa, for example, whilst the other countries have mechanized, Zimbabwe is still using traditional tools. So it is possible to meet our national quota in terms of consumption, exports, and also meeting our energy needs with the landmass that we have. I mean, in Zimbabwe, we are not a desert country. And if you look at
we could easily use a bit of machinery to provide enough.
Yes. This is why we are talking about innovation. We are talking about technology.
Can I just say yes, in terms of technology and science? Can I just say one of the advantages of, say, using coal, okay, as much as it is a pollutant, you still get more energy per kilogram from coal than you do from all these renewable energy sources. That's why they require a lot of land, especially if they are biofuels. They require a lot of land for us to till. So it would take a whole farm, for example, maybe to produce just one full tank of fuel. You'd need a lot of land for that. Whereas with diesel, you'd need less.
Yeah, I do agree with that, but it assumes that we are talking about today's technology, okay? And this is why the core is for the entire world to innovate.
Yeah.
Because, mind you, we have also to meet the both energy needs and food requirements for another 1.5 billion people who are coming on the earth by 2025.
Which is why I'm saying it doesn't help to have a political leadership which is looking inwards instead of outwards, because some of these technologies we could be sharing them. For example, if you look at the internet, the only reason we have internet all over the world is because we are sharing the satellites which have been put up by other countries. So if we are building walls, then what that means is there's less likely to be less cooperation, okay, in terms of sharing information and sharing knowledge and sharing these technologies for sustainable development.
Indeed, I mean, this is why the benefit of leadership renewal is that you bring in a fresh mindset that thinks from a global perspective. And now we are stuck with Robert Mugabe at 93 and ZANU-PF. People have been in power for the past 37 years. And they don't understand this language that we are talking about.
Which I'm glad you've mentioned that, because now we can talk about the mushrooming political parties, not the political party as such, but the wish by some individuals in those parties to instead of running, say, for a certain constituency and improving that constituency, they want to jump straight into the hot seat and solve Zimbabwe's problems, when probably they have not solved any local problems that we're aware of. So what do you make of these individuals? I'm not going to mention any names, but there are quite a number of doctors who have opted to go for the presidency in 2018.
Indeed, I've counted about 31 political parties so far. Added to the other defunct one, the number comes to about 50 political parties. Okay. In a country of 13 million people.
So in terms of the ballot paper, how many we'll need a booklet. I read someone was making a joke and saying, instead of having a ballot paper, we're going to need a booklet, because with all those political parties and everyone running for president, it's not going to fit on the traditional ballot paper.
And not only that, we are actually breaking the record that we have a political party for every 300,000 people. So that's worrying. But look at it. And I look at it that we are saying there's no democracy in Zimbabwe, and that's a fact. Okay? But yes, the problem, people are failing to understand that the problem is not the current opposition party. The problem is the ruling party. There's nothing wrong with the current opposition party. And why don't we come together, unite, and fight a common enemy, ZANU-PF in this case? And I can assure you that most of these parties that have mushroomed, they are being sponsored by ZANU-PF. And they are there to divide votes, to sort of divert people's attention from the real goal of removing ZANU-PF itself. I can assure you that any political party that is going to be formed or launched in 2017, Zimbabweans out there must be very suspicious of such a political party. Those will be parties sponsored by ZANU-PF for a specific reason. And I'm surprised that, look at it, this year alone, we've got 2 political parties that have been launched by pastors. Okay? And I think there's another one being mooted to be launched by another pastor. Right? And then if you look at the political ideology, none of them have got a political ideology other than to say that there is corruption in Zimbabwe, which, I mean, if you look at the MDC is an anti-corrupt party, and it has got very coherent policies. Okay? It is a social democratic party, in which case you look at most of these parties, they would tell you that they would want to stop corruption. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with that, and there's nothing. It's nothing new from MDC perspective.
So what would be your advice to someone thinking of starting a political party?
Look, the political parties, my suggestion is that let's join the mainstream political party, add value. Okay? I mean, look at it. We are talking about 31 political parties, right? What ideology is not been included in those 31 parties that you can say, well, I'm starting a new party with a different ideology other than 31 political parties? It's zilch. And some of these people, they are just selfish. I want to be the president. Right? People are failing to understand that in a democratic Zimbabwe, the cake is so big. Anybody can be anybody, you know. You can be whatever you want. But we need to overcome the hurdle of removing ZANU-PF. And being a president is not the only position that Zimbabweans should aspire to have. There are various positions that you can contribute
They think the opposition.
That's the emancipation of the people of Zimbabwe.
They say the opposition has failed to take power.
No, but look at it. If you ask those people to say, I know I've listened to one of them say we should have taken power in 2003. Well, of course, he was wrong. There was no election in 2003. Okay, and then we should have taken power in 2008. And we should have taken power in 2003. And I said, okay, fine. But why didn't we take power in those fixed points that you have mentioned? Was it because of the opposition party? Or was it because the elections were rigged? Now, the answer is very clear. That people who are rigging for ZANU-PF is the people behind the scenes. And this is the security sector. For as long as we don't control it, there is no chance. And these people are coming today, and they think they can control the security. Hang on.
I think they've got a method to take power.
No. Hang on. This is what I'm saying. That this is a mere fallacy. Sometimes you actually listen to what they're saying, and you can actually sense total ideological ignorance. MDC at the moment has matured since 1999. And this is why within MDC is actually have network in every institution in the country. Because it's the only main opposition party that is in parliament. And it's the only opposition party that is running local government.
Yes.
You go to army, within the army service, there are MDC, sympathizers. You go to CIO, there are MDC sympathizers. You go to even the core ZANU-PF Central Committee and Politburo of ZANU-PF, there are MDC sympathizers. And because of that, MDC itself is strategically positioned now than ever before to be able to flash out in terms of that rigging system.
Okay.
Because it's penetrated into them. Any new person coming today and purporting to have a solution is daydreaming.
Right. It's been almost 6 months since the introduction of the bond notes. I follow a lot of discussions on social media in terms of the bond notes and their effect. Where are we now with bond notes?
I think we also talked earlier on when the bond notes were introduced or were about to be introduced.
Yes, we had one conversation on that.
We made it very clear that the Zimbabwe, there's nothing for Zimbabweans to celebrate, and that Zimbabweans were being taken to at ransom by ZANU-PF, and that it was an ill-thought process of introducing bond notes, purporting that it was going to solve the issue of shortage of cash. We knew that the ZANU-PF, all they wanted was to take all the US dollars and then give Zimbabweans the bond notes, so that at the end of the day, the Zimbabweans are left with the useless notes, which are not legal tender anywhere other than within the Zimbabwean borders. And we say that. And 6 months down the line,
some people say there's nothing wrong with being a legal tender only in Zimbabwe, because if you look at the Pula, it's also only legal tender in Botswana, and the Rand is only legal tender in South Africa.
Well, then one might as well ask the question to say, yes, we used to have our Zimbabwean dollar. What happened to it? Yeah, they've got their Pula, and they've always had their Pula, right?
Yes.
Because of good governance. We failed in every respect to sustain our own legal tender Zimbabwean dollar, to such an extent that we had no option other than to abandon and to go for a dollarization. Okay.
does that mean that our economy is now dependent on what is happening in America in terms of their reserve bank there? Does that mean their reserve bank, the Federal Reserve policies, actually affect our own policies in Zimbabwe in terms of the economy?
Of course, if you use a foreign currency as a legal tender, you are at the mercy of their reserve bank or central bank, for that matter, in terms of what is happening there, even in terms of the volatility of that currency in that country. So whatever is being done by Donald Trump will affect the economy of Zimbabwe directly. Actually, it will be the only country that is directly affected by any policy of Donald Trump.
So now we are affected by the US dollar because it's printed in America, and the policies there will affect us. We are affected by the prices of oil because we don't produce oil and we use that US dollar to buy oil.
Yes, not only that, and okay, fine, I do understand the reason why we introduced the US dollar in the first place in the 2009 Government of National Unity. And because our money has become worthless and we needed to stabilize the economy, which was very noble then. But that was taken as an interim measure because it is not a sustainable arrangement. Why is it not sustainable arrangement? Is because our products in Zimbabwe have become very uncompetitive on the market because our cost of production is in US dollars, and we are the only country in Africa where our source of our cost of production is in US dollar, meaning that our prices, our commodity prices, are very high. So we cannot compete in terms of exports, even in terms of domestic consumption. This is why you find a lot of Zimbabweans do import from South Africa, from Botswana. So yes, so this was supposed to be just an interim measure to stabilize the economy, and then you introduce your own currency that you can then control using monetary policy and fiscal policy.
Right. I know that if you look at the agricultural revolution in the West, then you look at the industrial revolution, and now the technological revolution taking place. These countries, whenever they are getting into a lot of trouble, these revolutions have always helped them. And at this stage, if you consider, for example, that everyone in the world buys one of these, and these are products made by Americans. So there is a link between economic growth and development and the use of science and technology and innovation. And this is something that I think we are failing to do as African governments. If you look at Zimbabwe, for example, the introduction of bond notes is it's a financial instrument. It's financial engineering. And I think that we've done a bad job of it. So how can we incorporate science and technology? Because if you look at the Herald itself, for example, there is no section on science and technology, let alone a section on education. There is no section in the Herald on education, just for people to discuss and talk about education policy. There is nothing there. There are no reports. The only time we get reports of something happening in a school is if something has been stolen in a school, or if the minister is saying everyone should wear a green uniform or something like that. So what can we do?
I think that question, well, I will try not to answer it as much as you expect an answer. The reason being that there's nothing that you and me today can suggest to this government of Robert Mugabe, and that Robert Mugabe government will listen or to change course. We've said over and over again that in terms of investment, in terms of economic growth, all that comes through trust, in terms of foreign direct investment, all that will never be realized for as long as we've got wrong people in government. And ZANU-PF is not the party that can turn around things. It's not the party that can introduce that innovation and technology that will actually re-engineer the economy of Zimbabwe and going forward and being competitive within the region. Not only within SADC region, but at a global note. We have got the capacity in terms of the resources, both in terms of intellectual capacity, in terms of economic, in terms of natural resources, etc. The only problem that we have with greedy people who only thinks about themselves and only about themselves. And this is why we are stuck with this government of ZANU-PF, 37 years in power. They've nothing to show for it other than poverty, other than oppressing their own people. Other countries have moved on. Any country, if you look at it, we are the only country that have not changed leadership since 1980. And those that have changed leadership, change of leaderships comes with innovation, and actually injecting new, fresh ideas into the country, and the country will benefit, and so will be the economy. So yes, unfortunately we are where we are, and I think what Zimbabweans out there need to do is to concentrate on removing this regime of Robert Mugabe and put in place a new government, a new government with people-friendly policies that actually will work for the benefit of national integration and development.
Okay.
And MDC is very clear on that.
Right. I think we can end it here today. We've already gone past our... we thought we would do half an hour today, but there's always a lot to talk about. So we're looking at social justice and food security, chapter 2, which was a deeper discussion on agriculture and public awareness. We looked at how, for example, in agriculture, we need to use energy, but that energy may be competing, or the sustainable energy requirements, for example, using biofuels may compete with food security, because the same plants that we consume as a people are the same plants which are used by energy companies to produce fuel for energy needs. So energy is an important aspect of an economy. In fact, it's one of the key drivers of an economy. The more energy we control, the better our economy becomes. And we've seen this with the Americans and with the British and other countries. They've managed to ensure that there is enough energy. Just having this electricity, knowing that we can do a Skype interview without interruption, without a power cut, it's good for the economy, because someone somewhere is generating income because of what we're doing, and because there's enough energy. So I think, Elliot, if you can just give a closing remark, just to summarize in 2 sentences the chapter.
Thank you very much for all those who have been watching. Again, this is your program, and it's a regular program every Sunday at 9:30 p.m. GMT. So yes, we were discussing it. It's a deeper critical analysis of the correlation between sustainable energy and food security. So we're actually looking at from a global perspective. So about Zimbabwe, how can we learn from other nations? So a good example case study was in terms of Ghana. We looked at again briefly Brazil and the United States of America. So yes, and in next Sunday we'll be looking at chapter 3. Thank you very much. And
are there any questions on your end or comments? Or you can't access them?
You can access some of it. It's all comments and no questions.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. Let me see on my end. On my end, it's comments. Yeah, thank you guys for watching. We'll see you again next Sunday at the same time. Okay, I'm finishing.